Yes,
You have to always have conditional hyster length. You have
That's
to,
it, hedge,
I know
hedge,
if,
hedge,
I know the if conditional.
yes. I think that we may start now.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Abdurrahman Al-Ajlan. First of all, let me thank my chairs for all of the support and the time you spent with me. Thank you a lot. And I would like to thank also Ms. Abijar for all of her support, helped me express my idea more, and all of my friends with their support and inspiration, and also my wife. Also, in fact, she sacrificed her time with me. She was passionate about me also. I don't know how to start, in fact, but I will just jump immediately. After my review of the literatures, in fact, I found like a lot of studies suggested that leaders in higher education needs a lot of help in terms of their of developing their leadership behaviors. And some of the studies suggested leadership workshops, and others suggested any reflection process that helped them reflect on their leadership behaviors and enhance them. Hi, Dr. Gary.
Hello.
How are you? The second suggestion was implementing a 360 feedback as a reflection process for leaders to discover their weaknesses based on their team's perspective. And this is the focus in my study, in fact, studying the effect of applying a 360 feedback assessment in higher education for leaders, providing leaders with insights into their own leadership behavior. So the question, in fact, before I go far, what is a 360 assessment? And is it that simple? We take any 360 assessment exists in the market and benefit from it. So first, 360 assessment basically is it's a complex process. In fact, where a leader evaluates his own leadership behavior.
It's jumping.
His own leadership behavior and allowing his team to observe his own leadership behavior too. So can he compares his perspective with his team's perspective? So the benefit of it, by exploring this type of discrepancy between how a leader perceives himself and how others perceive him, he can really recognize the level of his or her self-awareness about himself. So one of the most popular tools exists in the market is the LPI. LPI stands for Leadership Practice Inventory. It was created by Kozes and Posner in 1987. And this tool measures 5 practices, which Kozes and Posner believe that those 5 practices are the practices that the extraordinary leaders engage with. First practice is modeling the way. Second, inspiring a shared vision. Third, challenge the process, enables others to act, and encourage the heart. So the LPI package, if you want to buy an LPI package, it contains, or it consists of an LPI account, also the LPI survey, which consists of the 30 behavioral statements, and each 6 of these behavioral statements represent one leadership practice. The standard version of the LPI survey is just 30 behavioral statements that measured numerically from 1 to 10, where 1 represents almost that leader never engage with that practice, and 10 almost always engage with that practice. So in my case, in my study, in fact, I chose to apply the standard version of the LPI, but I have the ability to add extra open-ended questions to this survey. But I chose just to provide them with the standard one. And as a result, they are going to receive only numeric feedback. Why I chose only numeric feedback? Because the literature review suggested numeric is better than text feedback in terms of reducing leaders' reaction when they received negative feedback. The third thing we find in the LPI package is the LPI workbook, which is that one. The LPI workbook, in fact, helps leaders to use it as a reflection material during their reading through their report. Did my participant use this LPI workbook? Only 5 leaders, in fact, used it. The rest, no. They just chose to read the report. And okay, so this LPI, in fact, is popular. And imagine, it was translated into 6 languages. These 30 behavioral statements into 6 languages, meaning it can be applied in many countries. Also, it was implemented in a variety of organizations, such as military, education, business, and even the US Congress. And this is where the question occurred in my head. Really, is it that simple? One tool consists of 30 behavioral statements, fits all of these organizations, all of the cultures, and benefit them as the same. I don't know the answer yet. But the short answer that I found in the literature review, no, it's not that simple. You just take an a 360 exists in the market and apply it in your organization. So after an intensive review, in fact, of the literature reviews, I found that the 360 feedback success is surrounded by factors and practices. What I mean by factors? Factors are the natural phenomena that just exist, impact the 360. For example, the LPI design, or the 360 design, the order of the questions, affect the success of it. Also, the type of the feedback that we get, whether it's numeric or text feedback, affect the success. Also, the organizational culture affect the success. Studies shows applying 360 feedback in a hierarchical system organization doesn't work it doesn't work well, in fact. Another example, like participant attitude. One of the most important factors, in fact, is the leader's receptiveness to receive 360 feedback. Also, leader's cynicism. The participant cynicism. Also, the participant's culture. If we apply 360 in the US, it's not like if we apply it in another like far distant culture, they call it. And the rater selection method also impact the success of a 360 feedback. Practices, what I mean by practices are the strategies that we can implement to increase the effectiveness of the 360 feedback. For example, ensuring the level of the confidentiality we add when we apply the 360 feedback affects the success. Also, our purpose of applying the 360 feedback, whether it's an evaluation purpose or a developmental purpose, that affects the success of the 360 also. And other things, the type of, or the selection of the 360 tool, and also how we facilitate it in general. And this is an important factor, in fact, also, because I focused on it in my research, how I facilitate the LPI. So based on this complexity I found in the literature review, then I said, so it's not enough reason for the LPI to be adopted in higher education without assuring its effectiveness and alignment with the organization's goals and visions. So the research problem was most of the LPI studies that I reviewed just applying the 360, the LPI 360, assuming its effectiveness without testing that based on the recipient's perspective. And the purpose of this study, therefore, is to determine the effectiveness of the LPI 360 feedback tool for providing leaders with insights into their own leadership behaviors. So how I am going to examine, or how I examine the effectiveness of the LPI. But first of all, I asked myself, what did this LPI promise to give its customers if they apply it? Then I can judge it. So when I went to the LPI website, I found they said leaders will gain deep insight into how they see themselves as leaders, how others view them, and what actions they can take to improve their effectiveness. Therefore, the research question is, how effective is the LPI 360 feedback at providing leaders with insight into their own leadership behaviors in higher education? So it seems to me, in fact, at the first time, qualitative research is enough to answer this question. And use semi-interview. This is the first time. But when Dr. Musburger and I start recruiting leaders, I asked myself, okay, what about my facilitation part? I just, as I mentioned previously, I gave them only numeric feedback, only a survey that provides numeric feedback. That might have an effect on their experience. So why don't I examine my effect, how I facilitated the LPI? And this is the first upgrade that added to my study. Also, which is converting my study from qualitative to a mixed method. And also, in fact, Kirkpatrick, the author of Evaluating the Training Programs book, he suggested that, or he emphasized the importance of not just evaluating what the trainees learned, but also how we facilitate this training program. So this is the second data collection method I added to the research, which is a survey that measures my effectiveness, or how I facilitated this LPI. The second upgrade, in fact, was added after I interviewed almost 10 leaders. I noticed almost all of them promised to do something with what they have learned during this process. That drove my curiosity to ask, okay, so how they are going to engage with this self-development. Then I asked Dr. Musburger, let's add the third piece, which is a follow-up question that sent 6 weeks after their interviews, at least 6 weeks after the interviews, asking about any new experiences. So now I have 3 sub-questions, which aligns with the mixed method research. The first question was, how satisfied were higher education leaders with the facilitation process? Second, how effective was the LPI as a tool providing higher education leaders personal insight or self-awareness? And the third sub-question was how effective was the LPI 360 as a tool for encouraging higher education leaders' self-development? So, as I mentioned, they have three questions. One question measures leaders' experiences with my facilitation process. And the second and the third question will explore the leaders' experiences with the LPI result. So, leaders' experiences with the facilitation process, or the tool I use to collect this data, the data for the experience, I used Kano model or Kano survey. I'll explain later what Kano survey is. The second question was how effective is the LPI as a tool providing leaders with personal insight, and that was answered via the interview, the semi-interviews. And the third was how they engaged with the self-development. That was answered by the follow-up emails. So this is the research design, in fact, of the mixed method I use, the convergent mixed method design. Hi, Dr. Harvard. So, I analyzed each data collection separately, and then I integrated these results and then interpreted the integration. Okay, how I facilitated the LPI. First, Dr. Mansberger contacted leaders and invited them, and one of the statements that she mentioned in the email was, your result will remain confidential. Neither Abdurrahman nor I will see or have access to this result. This is how one of the features that I added to the facilitation part to increase their confidentiality. The second thing we added, in fact, then I followed up with the second email, which consists of the consent letter and a sample of what the LPI package contains, as well as a commercial video about the LPI and journals that discuss the history and the validity and reliability of this tool. I think they needed that, since they are, I think that this is their right to know what this LPI, since they are going to spend time with it. Then leaders who agreed were assigned or were given free access to complete an LPI assessment. And it was a free access. I have to provide it as a free. In fact, I cannot recruit people and then asking them to pay $170 for the ceremony. The LPI survey, in fact, is editable. As I mentioned previously, I chose to provide them with just the standard, the 30 behavioral statement, instead of adding extra open-ended questions. Why? Because of the literature reviews. They suggested numeric better than text feedback in terms of reducing their negative reaction if they receive negative feedback. In terms of the observers, in fact, I allowed leaders to select their observers, but Also, if they want me to select that, that's really fine for me. But all of them that selected their own observers. And this is the fifth feature. These features I examined through the Kano survey. We got 14 participants in this study from WMU and Kalamazoo College. And it was really a nightmare. It was really a nightmare. We spent almost five months recruiting leaders, maybe more. We used a lot of connections to reach those leaders. While it took me 4 months to write 3 chapters, so we compare that. And this is the leader's position. Who's in the sample size. I have vice presidents, associate vice president, provost, associate provost, executive director, dean, and associates. So, results. The first question was, how satisfied were higher education leaders with the facilitation process? Again, why I asked this question? I want to recognize my effect on their experience. How I answer this question? Using Kano model. What is Kano model? Kano model is a model that categorizes the leader's needs into 5 categories, or leader's perspective about the features into 5 categories. Either they perceive a feature as a basic requirement, or as a performance, or as an attractive feature in the process, or as an indifference feature, or maybe a reverse. I will explain reverse later. So let's see this graph first to explain what's going on with these categories. If I added a feature that's perceived as an attractive, like wow, as an attractive, well, one of them is free access, in fact, attractive. That means this attractive feature dramatically increase leader satisfaction level, or has an effect of increasing the satisfaction level of the leaders dramatically. If I have a performance feature, that means, I will come to it later. Let's go with the basic requirement feature. If I add a basic requirement feature, it's absolutely, that might not affect their satisfaction level because they expect it to be there, in fact. But if I did not provide it, they'll be extremely angry. Performance feature is kind of has a linear association between how I execute it and their satisfaction level. It's like, you provide us more, we'll be happy. You provide less, we'll be less happy. It's a linear association. And indifference is really indifference. Whether I add it or not, it doesn't make any difference for them. Features are assigned as an indifference are really important, in fact, to be recognized to reduce the cost, if there is a cost, is assigned with the indifference features. So, how I calculated the satisfaction level. First, if I ask them about feature A, for example, I want to know first how many perceive it as a basic requirement, how many perceive it as a performance, and just find the frequency of how they perceive it. Then I plug it in this equation to calculate the satisfaction and the dissatisfaction level. And the satisfaction and dissatisfaction level ranges from 0 to -1 because of dissatisfaction, 0 to 1 because of satisfaction. Okay, here's the answer of the first question about leaders' experiences with the facilitation process. The first feature was the confidentiality. I allowed leaders to generate their own report. I told them that I will not have an access to their results. So in this feature, I have 6 leaders perceived this feature as a must-be or a basic requirement feature. 7 leaders perceived it as a performance. 0 perceived it as an attractive because it's really a basic requirement. And 1, in fact, perceived it as an individual. They don't care. And this is the level of importance of having this feature in the facilitation process. So 8.4, representing almost extremely important. Like, so important adding this feature to the process. And here's the satisfaction and dissatisfaction level. In average, it's almost 50. The effect of this feature on leader satisfaction level is almost 50%. It's like here, the satisfaction level about having this computational feature. But if that feature was absent, what would happen? How that would affect their confidentiality, their satisfaction level? That might decrease their satisfaction level to 93%. It would be almost there. If I did not include this basic requirement, it really have a dramatic decrease in their satisfaction level. Here's an interesting part. The additional emails, do you remember the additional emails I added to their invitation email? The journals and the commercial video. I asked them how did they like it. In fact, their perspective were split or varied based on who reviewed the LPI materials and who did not. Leaders who reviewed the reflection materials, they have 5 here, perceived it as a performance feature. I say performance because this is the highest frequency. The highest frequency represents how they generally perceive it. And let me go one more back. I said here it's a must be while it's 6. Why didn't I choose 7? Why didn't I say it's a performance feature? The confidential is a performance rather than must be. I said must be because there is a rule here. The left must win rule when almost the frequency is equal. Why? Because, in fact, this is the nature of a human being. If you provide them with a feature that's an attractive, if they get used to it, they will perceive it as a performance later. If they perceive it as a performance, after they get used to it, they will perceive it as a must-be, as a basic requirement. Why did not you add it? So this is the logic behind this rule, in fact. So here, leaders who reviewed the materials perceived the additional links as a performance, while who did not review the reflection materials, they perceived it as an indifference. And free of charge, yeah, absolutely, it's for free. It's attractive. That one is interesting, in fact, allowing them to select their observers. 9 leaders perceive this feature as a performance. And with the level of importance is of 7.4, almost there. They found they perceive it's really important for them to select their observers by themselves. Don't assign observers for us. Slide. And their satisfaction, the effect of adding this feature on their satisfaction level is almost 64%. Like here, by adding this feature, almost there. The last thing that one is really interesting because it comes against the literature reviews. This is the only numeric feedback. I provide them with only numeric feedback. I thought it's good. I thought that would be better for them. This is what the literature suggested. But in fact, 8 leaders said, no, no, no. It's the reverse. It's opposite. It's not like what you think. Only like 4 leaders, 3 perceive it as a performance, and 1 perceive it as an attractive. And these leaders, in fact, when I asked them, they said, oh, no more confusing. Let's just get only numeric. And those leaders, in fact, they said, no, we need more. I will explain later in the integration. Okay, so that suggests, in fact, other facilitators to include, or not to include, but to ask, to give the opportunity for the leaders to design their survey. LPI 360 survey is an editable. You can add extra open-ended question. You can just provide your leaders with the 30 behavioral statements. So I would say give the leaders the choice to select whether they add extra open-ended questions or not. So, and these are some suggested open-ended questions by the LPI study. And I asked, in fact, some of the leaders about this list, and they preferred the first 4 questions to be added to their survey if they have the opportunity to take it again. Second question. How effective was the LPI 360 feedback as a tool for encouraging higher education leaders' self-awareness or personal insight? It was answered by the semi-interview, and the semi-interview focused on 4 topics. I focused on 4 topics during the interviews. The first topic explained whether or not the LPI showed the higher education leaders how their leadership behaviors were perceived. The second topics, whether or not the LPI helped leaders to recognize what behaviors they need to correct or improve. The third topic, whether the LPI or not encouraged help leaders to discover what their followers need from them. And the last topic was whether the LPI 360 tool helped leaders to recognize the actions and behaviors that they were not aware of. So here's what we got. Like all of the leaders said, yeah, it helped us to see how our